Hello and welcome to another D&D Stories. I am your host, TheWriter. This is the show where I sit here and regale you with all the tabletop gaming stories and remember when something cool happened. So today we return once more to the horrors of Highseat. Miles and Dancy have gone out to the Undertown, the Undercroft, whatever you will, the ruin that surrounds Highseat at the base of the mountain, looking for the cultists that Dancy spotted earlier. They've left Madeline at home in the hideout, and they've discovered a trio of city guards are also skulking around, and they know that the city guard is in on this too. So let's continue from where we left off, shall we? So it's two men and a woman who are discussing how to move forward because there are, interestingly enough, a lot of hidden rooms and weird passages inside this cathedral, this church ruin. And Dancy saw a bunch of cultists go in here not too long ago. So if everybody's home, that means there are several factions running around at the same time here, none of which are all too friendly. So Miles is kind of whispering with Dancy on what their next move should be. Should they kill these guys? Should they knock them out? Should they, let them be the sheep on a leash and they can trigger whatever traps the cultists have laid down? Or let them run into the cultists first, maybe, and let them kill each other? Or how's this gonna go? Because they're not friendly with any of these factions. So, while they're talking on what to do, the conversation between the three guards suddenly turns into a loud argument, because it turns out that the two male guards are there to give the female guard to the cultists, because the cultists require sacrifices for their rituals, and she was the smallest and scrawniest, even though she's in the guard, so technically she should be a great athlete. They think they can overpower her because she's a woman. But it quickly turns sour, and Miles knows that, realistically, a 2-on-1 fight is not going to go well for this lady. So he decides that while they're squaring up to fight, he's going to jump in with the roguish backstab. So he runs in there, sneaks in there, and the woman, the guy's backs are to him. The woman kind of sees him, and the guys turn just in time to get a knife in the face. So the first guy goes down, and a melee breaks out. Dancy kind of runs into the fray. Dancy will help! And just jumps on the guy. She has no combat expertise whatsoever, but she's carrying the big satchel now that's full of the holy water shots, like 24, 30, 36 of them. And she jumps on this guy and basically just puts her hands over the slits of his eyes, over his armor, and he starts flailing because this fawn is on his back. And this woman, of course, pulls her sword and rams this guy in the stomach and knocks him to the ground, and Dancy gets smushed under this guy. It's just complete comedy blowout that they take these two guys out like it's nothing. And of course she pulls her sword from this guy's gut. Who are you? What are you doing here? Are you with these cultists too? I'll fucking chop your dick off. And just she's a very, very angry, straight-laced sort of person. During the melee, her helmet got knocked off because, of course, we have to do character introductions. And she's this beautiful, blonde-haired, blue-eyed thing who's decked out in plate mail from the neck down, so you couldn't hardly tell what she even looked like or what race she was or anything like that. Human lady, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, scowling, just had to kill two of her compatriots because these two strangers jump in to save her, and there's cultists elsewhere, so she's already having a bad day, and she's ready to chop Miles' dick off. He's like, wait, we're here to investigate the cult activity as well. And your compatriots were ready to betray you and feed you to the proverbial beast. Surely we can join forces for the moment. And she's doing the sense motive, and, he's not lying, so he passes. She's like, all right, but, until this, stay where I can see you, motherfucker, that kind of attitude. And, so they kind of make introductions. I am Miles. It's not actually his name, it's his pseudonym. I am Miles, this is Dancy. Dancy is Dancy! Just Dancy always talk in the third person. Dancy does! Shut up, Dancy. My name is Jocelyn. And the pun is, jostle into somebody. She's a big tough guard. Jocelyn, haha. But, they join forces. Jocelyn has joined the party. Da-na-na, na-na-na-na-na-na. But they decide they're going to do the rest of this, dungeon crawl as a group, because 3 is better than 2, and there's no telling how many cultists are here. Oh, there's a lot of cultists here. They find themselves at the lip of the main worship area, the chapel. That's what I meant. The great big room with all the pews and the pulpit and all the rest of that. Because this building is so dilapidated and ruined, the dais where the pulpit is now like a crater, like a meteor fucking fell from the sky, and around there they're kind of peeking out a door, and they see all this. The ground is ruined and covered with weeds. All the windows are blown out. There's no ceiling. There's vines crawling up the walls. The ruin you would expect if you're crawling through the remains of a abandoned city. And it's basically got a crater in it, or a hole, or some perfectly round indentation that goes deep into the earth. And they can see that there are tendrils sticking up out of it. And Miles is like, oh my god, it's a sarlacc! And out of character, I'm like, shut up. Shut up. But it's a big hole with a bunch of teeth in it, with tendrils sticking out every which way, kind of worming around. And there's 8 or 10 black-robed culty dudes standing in a circle around it, doing their culty shit, doing their dance. And they're dragging this unconscious figure towards the sarlacc, probably to throw it in as some sacrifice or something. And it's a young elven gentleman who seems wiry and probably very easily captured from all the people in Highseat. They probably bashed a fucker over the head and just kidnapped him in the middle of the night. But they're going to throw him into the sarlacc pit for whatever their evil designs are. And Jocelyn is not the sneaky kind. She is the city guard kind. So, of course, she kicks the fucking door open. Miles is like, no! And Jocelyn runs in there, sword a-swing and like a knight in shining armor. She's the lawful stupid paladin that refuses to sneak around the Knoll encampment. Oh yeah, she charged right in, screaming like a banshee. And of course, the 2 guys that are dragging the sacrifice toward the sarlacc pit see her, and then everybody else sees her, and suddenly it's a 10-on-3 fight. So they stop their ritual, they stop their culty chanting bullshit, and they all start pulling wands, and Miles is like, oh, this is so bad. Come on, Dancy, let's go! And he charges into the fray with like a sap and a dagger, like, oh, this is gonna be bad. And, they roll initiative, and this fight plays out. Now, cultists, in as far as like Call of Cthulhu games and different things like that, are not very powerful enemies. That's like the most powerful thing that you can fight before you start running into like actual monsters in the Call of Cthulhu mythos. So like dudes that know minor magic, dudes that can influence or hypnotize or things like that. But in Pathfinder, not so much. They've got magic items. They've got levels in Sorcerer. They've got all this other shit going on. But Jocelyn's the tank, so she's just gonna run in screaming. So while they're aiming all of their wands of magic missile at her, and there's just like buckshot of arcane magic flying in every direction, and just, if you were standing outside the building, you'd see all the windows flashing white like a freaking rave was going on. And while Jocelyn is soaking up all the damage, she like cuts a guy in half and then takes a 5-foot step and cuts another guy in half. and like the top half of two guys fall into the Sarlacc pit, and it goes, and blood goes everywhere, and the tendrils are flying around trying to grab other things because it's not entranced anymore. It's not under their culty bullshit anymore, so it's trying to grab at whatever it can. So while this 10 on 3 or 10 on 8, or excuse me, this 8 on 3 fight is going on, the third party in this fight is the Sarlacc itself while it tries to grab anything that moves. So if you don't make your grapple check, you can kiss your ass goodbye. So 2 or 3 cultists eat it straight away and get pulled into this hole full of teeth. And Miles runs in for the feint backstab, whack him over the head with the sap. And then he gets hit with the wand of magic missile. He gets hit with the wand of lightning bolt. And Dancy's running in trying to be helpful, but really just isn't. And finally, Miles just looks over and goes, "Dancy, throw the holy water into the Sarlacc pit." So Dancy reaches into the pouch and throws one, and the tendrils all kind of retract for a little while because holy damage versus a chaotic evil outsider or whatever it happened to be. The holy water works on it. It takes a d6 of damage. Not a lot, but enough to make it flinch back a little bit. So all the while, all this fighting is going on, Dancy's like, throw holy water, throw holy water, throw holy water. And while the cultists are dwindling, there's like one guy in the background, like the leader cultist, who's like, we must not fail, we must summon the ambassador. He speaks for who must not be named. And, the Sarlacc has eaten enough things that it's satisfied, and the ritual kind of completes itself in the middle of this melee, and it launches what looks like an egg or an oval-shaped object, launches it into the sky, and it arcs across the entire Highseat mountain, and just lands in the streets somewhere. It could be in a back alley, could be in the middle of the marketplace. They don't know, but they summoned something, and it launched it into the city like a Nerf football. And Miles is like, shit. So they keep fighting, and Dancy, of course, gets grabbed up by one of these tendrils while she throws one. She actually misses, so the tendrils come back out to come and grab whatever's burning it with holy water. It grabs up Dancy, and I was like, oh, and Miles is like, no, not tentacle hentai, but it's like bashing her against the wall, bashing her against the ceiling. She goes one way, goes the other way. Dancy's gonna be sick, bam! Dancy's gonna be sick, bam! It was like, ew. So this complete madness goes on for a long time until the last cultist, even the leader, falls. And Miles does the only thing he can think to do because, of course, he runs over to the satchel which Dancy had dropped when she was grabbed up, and he grabs the satchel and he throws the entire thing into the Sarlacc pit, and I'm like, okay. And, as a DM, I'm not expecting this, so, of course, this is what happens when you give somebody 36 of anything. They have to use them all at once. So Dancy had used up, 4 or 5. I was like, alright, well, those are the rough equivalent of shot glasses, so they're all gonna break when they hit the Sarlacc's stomach or whatever have you. If it gets caught on any teeth or whatever, it's gonna rip the bag open. They're gonna go everywhere. And I go, roll me how many were left? 31? Jesus Christ. Roll me 31d6 of holy damage. And he's like, yee! Because you never get to grab that many dice all at once. So he grabs a big fucking fistful of dice and he's like, blah! They go everywhere. It takes him 2 minutes to track them all down because they go everywhere all across the damn table. And he arranges them all, and he adds up to some outrageous number. Even if it was an average, 31d6 would be on average 93 damage. So 90, at least on average, 93 damage worth of holy all at once, which even for a creature that size falls into the catastrophic damage rules. If you ever follow those, is like if you're a medium creature and you take 50 damage, roll and make a fortitude save or you just die from sudden catastrophic damage. And then if you're large, it's 60, and if you're huge, it's 70, etc., etc. Well, 93, or whatever it was, he actually rolled really well. 93 or higher was more than enough for whatever size category the Sarlacc was. And, if you've ingested whatever's hurting you, there's not a fortitude save on God's green earth that's going to save you. So, and it just goes everywhere. And I was like, okay, well, I wasn't expecting him to kill it, so I was like, okay, and it's not actually called a Sarlacc, that's just kind of what we equated to. It's a big hole with teeth. And I was like, okay, well, it's technically this creature in Pathfinder, and that's however many levels higher than you, so he just got a butt ton of XP straight away, and it's like, he levels up like 2 or 3 times. Like that. I was like, shit, okay. The next couple of missions are going to be really easy for you. But this epic moment of throwing the bandolier of grenades into the fucking hell. But the Sarlacc goes silent, and then the floor kind of collapses around it because its muscles are not holding the hole open anymore. So it's like... Like, well, you killed it, you get X number of 1,000 XPs and all that good stuff. And finally, all the cultists are dead, and the wiry elven guy is laying there still unconscious and blindfolded, and the Sarlacc is dead, and I'm like, okay, combat's over. What are you gonna do now? And he's like, okay, we've got to, I've got my cue card of notes here, sorry. We're going to have to take Jocelyn, the guard, and whoever this guy is home with us to the hideout. Because if the city guard, this is Miles, if the city guard was arranged in such a way that Jocelyn was going to disappear tonight looking for cultists, then maybe it would be best if she did disappear. And, what happened to the other 2 guys? Who knows? They can only have conjecture. So, there's bodies everywhere. He's looting guys for their culty daggers and their pewter amulets of the starfish with an eyeball on it, and all their gold, and whatever stuff they've got on them. There's like 10 dudes here, plus the 2 guards, so there's plenty of loot to go around. Jocelyn is like covered with blood every which way, like Xena fucking warrior princess. And she's like wringing some of the blood out of her hair and puts it up in a ponytail. It's like, you're not bad in a fight, for a little bitch that stabs people in the back. Miles is like, thank you, I guess. But they were going to bring you in as a sacrifice as well, Jocelyn. You should probably come with me to my hideout while we straighten things out and see just what else is going on, because they actually had, some of the cultists had like mail on them, correspondence from other cultists, so they're going to read that and like run on the next move from there. And it's at this point that I'm sitting behind the DM screen and I'm starting to realize that this is slowly becoming like a harem anime, because he's got Dancy, the lovable idiot. We've got Madeline, the demure, sheltered girl who had a bad string of luck in prostitution. Now we've got Jocelyn, the tsundere, the one that hates you but kind of likes you. And I was like, this is a harem anime. Oh my god. So I start making notes for shit that's going to happen later, because we may as well run with it. So Miles brings Jocelyn and this wiry elven guy home, and they end up under his house again, where the hideout is. And by the time they arrive there, it's been like a fair number of hours. They arrive in the wee hours of the morning. It looks like Madeline has been, pulling the sheets off all the furniture, dusting, restocking the food shelves, putting all the books up on the bookshelves that are there and putting away the old ones, getting rid of the ones that have, mold growing in them, etc., etc. She's setting mouse traps. She's basically nest building for them while they're home. She's going to be like the maid or the cook or whatever. Not everybody has 5 levels in fighter like Jocelyn does. So some people are civilians. But he arrives home with Dancy and Jocelyn and this elven guy who it's not easy to really transport through the city because you're just carting some unconscious dude through the alleyways. They kind of had to stick to the shadows for a while. And they put him up in a bed and they kind of like exchange backstories there around the table about what's going on, about the 5-star flesh hand, and how Jocelyn had no idea that such a thing existed because even rumors about them are squashed. People like Dancy, people like Miles, they disappear when they get too close to the truth. So Jocelyn, who was in the city guard, was set up to be a sacrifice for these guys, so she was kept in the dark about all this. So she is, of course, furious and wants to go take out a bunch of guys, but one woman against the entire city guard isn't going to end with much more than blood. So he says, why don't you stay with us and we'll take out the 5-star flesh hand together. Strength in numbers, and we've got a fawn and we've got a former bar wench. Why not a former city guard? You could dye your hair or something and change your name and you'd have a whole new lease on life. And she is, of course, furious about this. But, she does not want to be lined up to be a virgin sacrifice like everybody else has been. So they also have the ambassador to worry about, which is a kind of a dark sounding thing. The ambassador, he speaks for the one who shall not be named. Who is no doubt this person that all children know the name and no adult dares speak it. Well, if they can get a hold of this ambassador, well, maybe they'll learn a thing or two, or maybe they'll get a few more pieces to this puzzle, because if there's some greater evil lurking in Highseat that needs like a mouthpiece, maybe if they destroy the mouthpiece, it'll slow down the cult, at least for now. And Jocelyn sees the wisdom in this and sees kind of what's going on. And they paw through all the effects that they found. They find like a grimoire of dark magic, and nobody there can use magic, so it doesn't really affect them in any regular ways. Normally in like Call of Cthulhu games, if you open a fucking grimoire, you go insane from the forbidden knowledge inside, but I'm not a dick of a DM like that. So they paw through this grimoire and they say, yeah, you need this many culty dudes, and you need a virgin sacrifice, and you need this, that, and another, and you can summon a sarlacc, and then you feed X number of people to the sarlacc, it'll summon the ambassador, and the ambassador will speak for, the greater beyond that mortals cannot comprehend, etc., etc. So another piece to the puzzle appears. Whoever or whatever everybody keeps talking about cannot speak directly to humans, because if it does, they just go insane. So they need an ambassador, someone who will speak for this greater evil. And they're like, okay, well, we failed because they summoned an ambassador. Surely they can call another if they need to, but we can be a thorn in their side at the very least and learn more. So the new target becomes the ambassador, and he, she, or it landed in the city. They saw it, like I said, they saw it sail into the fucking sky like a Nerf football out of the Sarlacc pit. So it's somewhere in Highseat. They just gotta find it and, kill it, torture it, get information out of it, or the people around it. It's not really clear, because it wasn't a humanoid shape. It's probably some sort of outsider, like a beholder or a chaos beast or some blob or monstrous thing that's not completely overwhelming to cause insanity when it speaks. So no doubt it's horrific and terrible, but not enough that you would go mad just by looking at it. So Jocelyn decides there is wisdom in this and strength in numbers. So she's going to stick around and kind of be a part of the gang. So it's around this time, and you can't really make this up, because normally once a character joins your party in an RPG or whatever, they kind of stick around until either the end of the story or until they get killed. But that discounts for player agency. After a while, Miles straight up asks Dancy. He goes to her and says, "Dancy, if I released you from your life debt, you'd stick around, right?" And Dancy says, "No, Dancy would run back to the woods and be merry and free." And he goes, "Really? No, wow, no skin off your nose, I guess, And, Dancy says in so many words, well, their lives are at risk every day, and they're fighting forces from beyond the stars, and cults and all kinds of terrible things. Dancy is not a fighter so much. I mean, you could put a sword in her hands, but there's not a ton she can do. Throwing the holy waters and trying to not get tentacle hentied to death, that was a pretty horrific experience for her. And he kind of looks around for a minute and goes, "Dancy, if you don't think you can help, you can go. I can release you." And she goes, "No, Dancy owes you a life debt. Dancy must be here until it is repaid." He goes, "Well, you fought by my side, and you threw all the holy waters, and you helped me sneak around the cathedral. You showed me where that cathedral was. You did a lot of good. But I don't want you to stay here under some sense of obligation. You need to be here because you want to be here. And if you think you can vanish deep enough into the woods to be beyond the reach of the 5-star flesh hand, perhaps among other fawns or among the woodland creatures or what have you, then I release you. You should go and be free, be happy, be outside. Don't you like outside?" And Dancy kind of scratches the back of her head and she smiles, like, Dancy does like outside. But if Master Miles will release Dancy, she will go and be free. And he kind of takes her by the shoulders and goes, "Dancy, you have done more than enough, to repay your life debt. You are free." And Dancy leaves, and she goes off. She's gone, kind of gone from the story, gone from the campaign, at least for now. Maybe she'll come back, maybe she won't. But Miles sends her on her merry, partially because he can't stand her, partially because if she sticks around, she's gonna die. Madeline stays at home to cook and clean. Dancy came with him into a dungeon and almost got killed. So she does, like I said, she does not have like five levels of fighter like Jocelyn does, and she doesn't really work a lot of magic. So she is innocent in all this. And she leaves. She goes off into the wild green yonder, into the woods beyond Highseat, not to be seen again. And Miles, of course, sits back, because once, even if you're annoyed with one of your characters, one of your party members, once they're suddenly gone, there's kind of a gap. There's kind of a like a nature hates a vacuum kind of moment where you have somebody that makes a lot of noise and talks in the third person and is kind of the comedy character, and then they're just gone, so the only ones left are the serious people. But there's still 3 people there in the hideout, and Madeline is doing her best to make this weird place a home, even though it's basically a multi-roomed basement. She's trying to make it more homely. And Jocelyn's kind of sitting at the table, watches this woman go. She's kind of like cleaning her sword, watching this lady go. And Jocelyn kind of nods along because, slavery is not illegal in Highseat, but it can be frowned upon by the more chivalrous, if you will. And they do all the regular stuff you would expect them to do. They clean up, they level up, they go shopping, they eat, they rest, they get all their HPs back, etc., etc. And Jocelyn decides that she needs to be proactive against the 5-star flesh hand. So, being the serious soldier type, she decides that she needs to hand in her V card if she's going to be fighting these guys. Because if they gain power by sacrificing virgins, tough girl soldier that she is, she decides that, well, Miles is there, he's good enough. And Miles is like, what? I go, she's gonna try and seduce you, if only so she won't be Sarlacc food. And he goes, wait, she's gonna use me for sex? How... And it's just kind of this reverse situation that pops up, like, yeah, he's good enough, come here, take off your pants. Miles is like, okay. He feels kind of used, but he goes along with it, because Jocelyn's attractive, tall, fit, blonde. And she kind of looks at him like, how often do men use sex to get what they want? And he goes, how can men use sex to get what they want? Sex is what we want. And we kind of fade to black while this super awkward sex scene goes by. And I go, roll me ride, athletics, whatever you want. She's on top. I mean, there's no way around this. She's sexing you. You're not sexing her. So, a knight with a grumpy virgin who is doing it for no other reason than to get a target off of her chest. You're a little flattered, but you're a little concerned at the same time. So, completely unromantic, completely unlusty. It's like form and function and nothing else. So Jocelyn gets, erases that target off her chest, hands in her V card. Okay, so now the 5-star flesh hand can't use her in any other rituals, even if she's specifically named for one. So that went that way, I suppose. The next morning, after they've kind of washed the shame off, Miles is feeling like a used piece of chewing gum because she's a lot stronger than him. I was like, she was the man last night, so you feel like a rumpled piece of chewing gum. You got a couple of bruises, and he's like, stop. I was like, all right, you meet at the breakfast table. It's very awkward. Shut up. Madeline is very concerned out of the noises that came out of your bedroom. Stop! Shut up! But they have breakfast and they're going through the cultists' effects. They have this ritual book and they can't really hand it off, but they can use it as evidence later. So Miles locks it up. And they've got all these bits of correspondence, most of which are not very useful. But they do find a couple of receipts, and the receipts are for human slaves. Now, in Highseat, like I said, slavery is not illegal. It's a medieval society, so yeah, there are slaves of all different shapes and sizes and colors from all across the world. And right now, the going rate for a singular slave is 1,700 gold pieces. Now, how did we arrive at that amount? I don't remember. It was just, expensive but not impossible. So, let's see. I'm checking my notes. Yeah. Also, among all the receipts and stuff are correspondence that lead them to a place called the Squatter's Bar. Now, I imagine part of if the cultists are buying slaves, they're probably looking for virgins just so they can sacrifice them. Because if you they're basically treating them like spell components. A living spider and a drop of liquid mercury, and then sacrifice a virgin, etc., etc. They basically put a gold amount on sacrificing virgins, and they're going about it that way instead of just snatching somebody off the street and people might come looking for them. But if you buy a slave and then you kill them in this horrific ritual, nobody's going to come looking for a slave. So that's how they're doing it. And since the king and the city guard, etc., etc., is caught up in this, a lot of money can be passed around to make all this stuff happen. So 1,700 gold, like, for a ritual is perfectly doable to these people. But they get they find this correspondence that leads them to a place called the Squatter's Bar, because apparently they're meeting with a slaver there who's just got like a ship full of dudes, and he's going to hand them off for 1,700 gold a head. And they're from like this far away, not really Africa, not really like Amazonia, but like a jungle sort of place where you can see Rakasha and different sorts of animal people. They're not even completely human, stuff like that. But they're still sold off as slaves and rounded up by pirates. Basically, they're in correspondence with like a pirate lord, basically. And Highseat is several hundred miles inland, so the fact that they're meeting with a pirate lord this far inland is very strange. But if you've got a ship's worth of slaves and they're 1,700 gold apiece, you can afford a few weeks' travel. So, and on top of that, if other cultists are going to meet him there, that's going to be more people that they can take out. So if they just keep chipping away at this cult, eventually, hopefully, they'll run out of members, because they took out, like I said before, they took out 10 guys. But clearly, the 5-star Flesh Hand has tendrils in all parts of Highseat, so they can kill as many of these guys as they can. Hopefully it'll slow them down at least a little bit. So they decide they're going to go to the Squatter's Bar. But first they need to deal with the young elven gentleman. He was not a slave, but probably, like I said, somebody they snatched off the street. And they give him the smelling salts, and they find out his story. And it was about how you would expect. He was walking home late one night, and was just reaching the age of manhood. He hasn't had a wife. He hasn't had any lovers. They ask him all the weird, awkward questions. Are you a virgin? And he's like, what business is that of yours? And he's like, yes, look at this grimoire. You could have been a virgin sacrifice. Are you a virgin? And he's like, yes. Yes, he's a virgin, etc., etc. And they go through that fun conversation. And basically they stick him on a boat and say, because there's a river that goes by Highseat, and they stick him on a boat and they say, go. Just go. Get out of here, man. And he goes to the Highseat bank, and he withdraws everything he's got, and he gives them a good portion of it for saving his life, and he's gone like a leaf in the breeze. He gets out of Highseat as soon as he can, because if there's culty bullshit going on, he doesn't want to be anywhere near it. So they stick his butt on a boat, and he keeps going, towards that horizon to get away from this place. So they kind of hand him off. And I give Miles a bunch of XP, good job, you saved the hostage. He didn't fall into the Sarlacc pit or anything like that. And they took good care of him, and they didn't hand him over to the city guard, because that would have been redundant. And I was glad he remembered not to do that. So, like, oh, this poor guy, he was kidnapped by cultists, and the city guard would have been like, really? You don't say? Come along with us, young man. And they shove him into another Sarlacc pit. That would have been really funny. But Miles remembers his P's and Q's and all the little details he's seen so far. So they stick him on a boat. They get a gold reward. They get an XP reward, etc., etc. So, like I said, they go shopping. They get a bunch of new stuff. They get new ion torches and better weapons and potions and a couple of rings and a bunch of stuff. and they're setting up to go to the squatter's bar. Now, Miles decides that he's going to go in on his own. And again, they leave Madeline at home because she's trying to stay hidden. And she doesn't have any levels in anything, so she's going to be their homemaker, basically. He's basically a maid. I feel kind of bad for her, but not everybody can be a hero. And Jocelyn goes with him, and they head up to the squatter's bar, this hidden place that Jocelyn has heard of before, but nobody was willing to divulge any secrets, even criminals that get captured or criminals that are snitches. Nobody snitches on the squatter's bar because you won't live long enough to enjoy whatever benefit you get for it. So they talk to a few people, and Miles pulls in some favors because you remember he was kind of underground as it was. But he pulls in some favors, and they read the correspondence, and they finally get an address. And he tells Jocelyn to stay to one side, like out in an alleyway, in case the manic bar fight starts and he has to run for the hills. He wants her to be out there to be like his backup. He's gonna go in by himself. He's devilishly handsome and roguish. He'll be sure to fit right in with all those would-be traders and drug dealers and slavers, etc., etc. He can just kind of settle in and be amongst his people, as it might say. But Jocelyn is not happy about this, but she's also dressed like a city guard. So after she gets her new nondescript set of chainmail and stuff, and gets rid of her city guard badge and effects, she decides, okay, just in case one of these rapscallions is somebody that I've scolded or beaten or jailed before, I will stay outside as you ask, Miles, but don't take too long and don't keep all the action to yourself. You know, she's very grouchy. But she kind of does like the lean against the brick wall, folds her arms and like has one of her legs tucked up, that kind of thing. She's checking both ways down the alleyway to make sure nobody bothers her, etc., etc. She's just gonna kind of hang out in the shadows. And Miles goes to the squatter's bar, and he gives the guy the password, because the password was on the correspondence. Don't forget the password is blah blah blah, because it's like a game. You need to know the password before the invincible guard will let you in. But he wants to do this like the civil discourse sort of way, where he can get in without kicking anybody's ass and getting the entire bar into a fight. So he gives the guy the password, and he goes in. And I go, okay, what is your goal here? What are you gonna do? And he goes, well, first I'm gonna case the place, and I'm gonna see if I can find more of these culty guys. Then I'm gonna find this pirate lord and see about him, and see if we can find out anything more about the activities of the five-star flesh hand. And it's not too bad of a place. It's like any other seedy bar. They've got rooms off to one side for prostitutes. They've got an area for illegal gambling. They've got a big lounge area with topless waitresses, because of course they do. They've got a big muscly dude out there with, you know, a keg on each shoulder, passing them out to a bunch of dwarves. There's a freaking dungeon down to one side where you can pay a dude to torture some guy you brought in for whatever information. It's kind of a black humor kind of place where there's music and stuff, but there's just as likely to be somebody getting stabbed off in the corner, etc., etc. It's a dark, poorly lit place, and there's probably well over 50 people here. So it's a pretty successful underground sort of place. And Miles kind of shifts back and forth because he's there by himself. You know, if he screws up, then he's not getting out. There's too many dudes here. So he kind of shoves his hands in his pockets, and he hunches a little, and he puts on his best scowl, and he walks in like he's supposed to be there, etc., etc. And I go, roll a bluff check so you don't look like a nervous schoolboy or something. And he rolls really well. I was like, all right. anybody that looks at you doesn't find you very interesting, so you continue on, you chat up one of the waitresses, and it doesn't take you long to find some of the culty guys you're looking for, because what's one of the best ways to intimidate somebody? You dress for the part. So there in the squatter's bar, in full culty regalia, you find like 4 or 5 dudes just kind of leaning around a table, whispering amongst each other. They've got their black culty robes and their pendants and their black hoods and all that good stuff. They're pretty easy to spot, but they are one table of many of evildoers that hang out in this hive of scum and villainy. So Miles gets a chair at a table near there and listens in on what they're talking about. So he gets a drink, he gets a meal, he pretends that he's just by himself, he's not really paying attention to anybody, but he's listening to the guys that are directly behind him. So he eavesdrops on them while they're talking. And Miles finds out that they're here to pay for like half a dozen slaves. They're going to meet this pirate lord right here in the bar. They're going to pay him directly, and then these slaves will be directly handed off to them from the usual location. Which, again, given that slavery is legal in Highseat, could very well just be out on the market. So 1,700 gold times 5, I don't have the math in my head, but it means that they're carrying quite a bit of money with them, or at least one of them is. So somebody has a pouch full of platinum on them, and this gets Miles' attention because 1,700 times 5, whatever, is a pretty good payday, and he does have 4 or 5 levels in Rogue by now because he killed a Sarlacc with a holy water bomb. So they're waiting for this pirate lord, and they decide, while we're here, that while they're there, they may as well take in the comforts of home while they can. So one of them goes off to get food, one of them goes off with a prostitute, one of them goes off to gamble, etc., etc., and one of them gets left, holding the check, so he's there whenever the pirate lord guy shows up. And Miles kind of waits for a while, and he's like, okay, I'm going to follow the guy that went to go gamble. And one by one, he kind of takes these guys out for their own vices. And really, it was just like sort of a set of mini games for him, so he could see all the different areas that this horrible place had to offer. So he followed the gambler for a while, and then using his bluff checks and stuff, got to the same table and out-gambled him. So he ended up with his 1,700 gold. He would have to go back to the table and tell them that they can only get one more, or one less slave, because he lost all of his money. And of course that guy gets tagged on by a bouncer and gets thrown out into the alleyway. Another guy went off to go find some food and hit on some of the topless waitresses. And of course, Miles steps in to white knight for them under the guise of being a concerned citizen in this complete shithole. So while they're behind like a decorative plant, he freaking stabs the dude in the solar plexus and sits him against the wall and kind of puts his hood up so he looks like he's passed out drunk. And then he goes after the guy that went to go get a prostitute, and it's only been 10 minutes, but he's passed out already and the girl is gone. Oh, well, I'll just stab him in the neck. So he goes into the side room, and he finds out which one the cultist is in, because his culty robes are hanging on the door. And the prostitute's already gone, so he just goes and stabs him in the neck. I was like, okay, never consider yourself lawful again. So he takes these guys out one by one until he finds that the pirate lord has shown up to do business. Now, it looked like the money had been divided between the 5 cultists, but I probably misspoke earlier when I said that he out-gambled the 1,700 gold, because the one guy was carrying the big purse, so scratch that, I guess. but he got thrown out by bouncers, so I guess that doesn't really matter. He, man, the sun is right in my eyes. Jesus Christ. I'm sorry if this video looks weird. But he sees that this pirate lord shows up, and he looks exactly how you think he would. He's got a big, broad, hairy chest and a big hat with a skull and crossbones and a big crimson cloak that goes down around him. He's got this woman on a chain next to him to hold his stuff, because he's a slaver, of course he does. And they sit to exchange money and give each other the meager threats that ne'er-do-wells often do. And the cultist kind of hands off the money, and he gets a receipt, and he gets whatever documentation he needs to get these 5 or 6 slaves from the drop-off spot. Now, Miles kind of has a choice. He can either chase the cultists or chase the pirate lord, because the pirate lord has information on the activities, or I guess like the buying habits of these guys, and the cultist probably has more correspondence, or better yet knows the plan, or better yet, so he's either got to chase one guy or the other, because they're gonna start moving off after a while. Now, of course, being in a seedy place like this, the pirate lord decides that he's going to head off to just like a room for the night. He's got his money, he's handed off his goods, he's just going to lock the door, etc., and kind of head up for the night. And once he learns this, Miles goes after the culty guy, and he decides, okay, he's expecting to go off and get 5 or 6 slaves, so he's got like the paperwork for them, and he is gonna be vulnerable because he's by himself. His other buddies, he thinks, are out among the crowd, so he's gonna be by himself, like being the one guy that gets stuck actually doing the culty stuff like he's supposed to. He's kind of got this grudging grump about him that he's the only one who's actually following orders, etc. So while he's going up the stairs, while there's nobody else around, while he's going up the spiraling stairs, because this place is kind of underground, while he's going up the spiraling stairs, Miles takes him out, and again sets him down like he's drunk, and pours a bit of ale on him, etc., sets the mug next to him, and takes the 5 passes for slaves, along with whatever like correspondence and different like culty shit that he's got on him, his dagger, his pewter necklace, his magic grimoire, his wand, etc., and just leaves him to bleed out there. Nobody's gonna notice because it'll pool under his robes. I'll be fine. And he goes back to chase down the pirate lord. Now, the rest of the squatter's bar is no different than any other tavern. Like I said, there's a lounge area, there's a gambling area, there's a brothel off to one side, but there's also like a tavern. So he decides he's going, rather than to just go charging down the stairs, he decides he's going to rent a room for the night and then chase this guy down, probably murder him, probably steal whoever that slave girl was, and probably add her into the harem, but whatever. And he decides he's got to take this guy out. Not only that, but because he's carrying a lot of gold on him, like 5 or 6 people's worth of slave money, or 1,700 gold times 5, whatever it was. I'm sure somebody will put it in the comments below. And so he readies himself for kind of a boss fight, because Pirate Lord surely means that he's going to have some skills to him. So he's got to prepare himself for a big fight. And that is where we will stop for today. So I hope you guys enjoyed this story, and I will see you on the next D&D Stories. Keep gaming. Thanks for listening. Hit that like button for me. If you'd like to hear more stories by me, please check out my audio novels here on YouTube. They're available for free. Cyranox the Feared is swords and sorcery, and Shield Maiden is all about superheroes.
check them out for me. And if you're feeling extra generous, I do have a Patreon as well. Links in the description below. Keep gaming.